Hey y'all. So we're gonna wrap up our little fun we had with the Canelo Crawford fight. I just want people to notice something here, okay? If you saw this fight and then you saw the judges' scorecards, you can see exactly what I mean about trusting the judges, okay? It turned out I was absolutely right, and few people also were. Not only me, of course, but there's no question that Crawford made easy work of that night. And it's no fault to Canelo, who's also a great fighter. It just has to do with the styles, the relative styles, and also perhaps the. You can make an argument that Crawford is indeed a very elite fighter, even among excellent fighters and possible all time greats. But, just as we had surmised, Crawford didn't have to hit Canelo hard. He had to hit him accurately, his timing had to be good, and he had to be able to show elite movement that was both economical and you could see his ability to pivot. Very important because when you angle or you pivot in any fighting art, it's a way to economize your movement. Okay? And great fighters, Us does it as well. They have an understanding of resetting. Okay? So that they never really try to exert themselves and go a great distance when they're trying to be evasive. And Crawford was very effective doing that, which to me was no surprise. The only surprise for me was that a lot of people didn't get this. I seldom will bet on fights these days. I did bet on this fight because the judges always screw things up. And they almost screwed this fight up. I mean, if one more judge had voted like the other judges, and let's say Canelo had one more good round in that fight, it would have been called a draw. I want you to think about that for a second. Um, so I just want to let everybody know watch the fights. You learn a lot if you actually watch the fights and understand and break down the different elements. Don't listen to all this horse shit that you hear from so many people about, cliches about what fighters are doing. For example, weight, okay? Now, Saif Karman also pointed this out, and much respect to him. Weight. Weight was never important in this fight, okay? And believe it or not, there's a measure that's always much more important than weight, and that is your length, your ability to extend reach, because reach gives you the asset of being able to get there first, okay? And when you're using something like a jab, particularly, and trying to counter your opponent, that's a very important consideration. So the weight is irrelevant in a sense. I mean, there are times when it does matter also. Keep that in mind. Every situation has its own understanding. And if you want to be able to prognosticate properly with fights, you get a guy like Dwyer. Dwyer, he's very good at setting up his bets, and I know he's successful, but he looks at things when he's making points about fights that sort of, in my own opinion, are a little bit haphazard. And I love him, man. I love his channel. I'm being affectionate. I'm not trying to rank on him. But what information is important when you're looking at a particular fight? That's what you have to ask yourself, okay? Because there's always going to be competing narratives. And what happens is the media picked up on the fact that Canelo was younger. Canelo was stronger physically because he was bigger. It was assumed, although again that was sketchy because if you know anything about Crawford, he was a wrestler, and wrestlers are strong. Okay, it's a very strong sport. Um, you know, but again, you got to watch that stuff because you got to look carefully. If you look carefully, Canelo's had what, like twice as many fights as Crawford. You know, he's gone up and down many times in weight, um, catch weight fights and what have you, and he's been in his type of opponent that he favors is generally a fellow puncher, and those fights. They tend to be very um, taxing. So, you know, again, you got to look at things carefully. What's a few years? Is it important? Is it not? Are we talking Bernard Hopkins, or are we talking there are times when a fighter becomes old in a night? You know, and it's very important. You know, are we talking Deontay Wilder, relatively young heavyweight who his last few times really looked like he had seen better days because he looked like he had aged out a little bit. Um, he looked that way. I preface that. I'm not saying he necessarily did. There are other factors involved. But, you know, if you learn to analyze fights, it's a good exercise for your practice because it will teach you how to look at things and consider them in a logical manner that applies to your own combat understanding. Um, Things like boxing are wonderful because they don't have so much involved that it becomes almost impossible to look at things consistently. Like one thing with MMA, which is kind of a property of the sport in general, it's inherent to the idea that you're fighting and using so many different possible techniques, is that there's so many chances for one guy to win, whereas, you know, just willy nilly. And that's why MMA is interesting to a lot of people. You don't have this sort of, it's a lot more, it's very interesting. There's a lot more competition coming up to a dominant position. But in boxing, you don't have that much. You know, you've got punches, and like chess on one board, not three-dimensional chess, it's a lot more than checkers, but it's not so much that you lose the ability to really be able to have some predictive understanding about how these techniques will apply in a given scenario. So, you know, these are good things to do. Um, Terrence Crawford is a great fighter. He moves at an elite level. I think he's a lot stronger fighter, for example, than Mayweather. I never thought much of Mayweather. I think Mayweather is a great fighter, but he never challenged himself. I don't think we'll ever really know. As compared to somebody like Roy Jones, who, you know, fought some really great fighters um, when he was coming up and established that not only could he win, but he was actually dominating fighters like Tony, who were a fellow elite fighters. I tend to think James Toney is an incredible fighter. I mean, again, he has a certain style, and when you're a counterpuncher, for example, you can get into some really bad situations if you're fighting somebody who's lightning fast, like Jones. You know, you're not going to counter him. It just doesn't work. You know, there's a certain limit. But I digress. The point is that, you know, you see some very elite qualities in Crawford to do what he did. You know, to challenge himself, and he has that level of skill. You know, his boxing IQ, but even more than that, his boxing IQ, his speed, his toughness, all wonderful. But look at the movement. Okay, look at how the movement is what creates the groundwork for all the other things that one can possibly become exceptional in. And Crawford, look at the difference between how Crawford moves and somebody like Caleb Plant, who is a great fighter, you know, not great, excellent fighter, but Look at how much economy of motion and pivoting and understanding of distance and timing that you see with Crawford by comparison. Anyway, we'll end this here. Take care, guys.